Patrick Cook here. Welcome to session number 19 of our tutorial series number 4, where we are talking about Mandelbulb mutations. All right, now we are ready for some pretty advanced stuff. I'm going to clean up here. We had talked about using MutaGen to build up a personal library. All right, which I think we've done pretty good here. All right, we've got some interesting mutations that we've saved off. Hey, and I showed you a little inside secret. Well, maybe a big inside secret. It's a way to be able to utilize the animation maker to temporarily store graphic images as keyframes, and then come back in later, pull them up to the editor, save them off to your Mandelbulb library. Okay, let's clean up a bit. All right, let's clean up. I think we had some significant progress there. I am going to restart the Mandelbulb3D application, and we've got a nice clean palette to work with. Now, this whole tutorial series is all about the MutaGen. And very early on in our discussion, we were talking about the various use cases for the MutaGen. One of those use cases was the process of discovery. It fast tracks discovery. You can actually use the MutaGen to get some interesting graphic extensions. Okay, so where this base is now mutated, and then on this graphic is mutated, then this graphic is mutated. And so you can use the MutaGen to fast track your creativity and increase productivity. Okay, so that was one use case. The other use case was where you could use the MutaGen to kind of test. All right, test. Try different things. Okay. And you're testing in a non-destructive way, which is pretty cool, because I'm not actually, nothing is bothering this main editor. All right, but what I'm doing is I'm testing. I'm saying, well, look, what if I was to just modify the parameters a bit? You know? That's a test. It's a non-destructive test, but it's a controlled test, because I can say, modify a lot or modify a little or not at all. All right. So it's a non-destructive controlled test to see what will happen if, in this case, your properties are modified a lot or a little. Okay. So use case number 2 would be to test and see what else can be done with a base graphic. Right? Now, we also talked about another use case where you can actually utilize the MutaGen to help build an animation. Now, that's what I want to spend the rest of this tutorial series talking about. I want to actually show you how to use, and I think I demonstrated it very early on, but now we're going to look at it in some depth. Using MutaGen to help build an animation. Now, that's not something that you normally run across. That's pretty deep stuff. That's pretty deep. And so I believe that saving that discussion for the end of this tutorial series, I think that was wise, because it depends upon some understanding of the probability options and the strength options, all right? and it also relies upon some um, some kind of some basic knowledge of animations, okay, with using the Mandelbulb 3D. So let's do that. Let's utilize the MutaGen for building an animation. And the next session or two or three or four or whatever it takes, I'm going to walk you through that, and we'll see if we can actually get an animation out of this deal. Okay? So what I've done, I have mutated this. Okay, and I think we're going to keep the graphic fairly simple because I don't want to get too complex. I would prefer that you understand the process and maybe the rules of thumb for using the MutaGen for building an animation rather than trying to show you some, really fancy, clever animation here. So let's just keep our graphics simple, okay? Now, you'll notice here that I had, well, let's do it again. Let's crank these parameters all the way up, full strength. I'm not interested in swapping out formulas right now, and I'll tell you why in a few minutes. So let's mutate. We're going to mutate this base, and we're only mutating the formula properties. That's all up in here, okay? Just the properties. We're not adding or exchanging any formulas, nothing to do with the Julia mode, nothing with the iteration count. Okay. So you'll notice here that I have a graphic which is just slightly modified. All right, from this mutation, let me send it up to the editor. That mutation is just slightly different than our base, because all it did, if you can see this, is just change the Z multiplier property. All right, now, rule number one with using the MutaGen to assist with animation or keyframe making, rule number one is that you want to have small changes to the formula construct. Small changes. All right. Now let's send this back to the editor. All right. Let's get our animation maker up here. All right. Let's push this. Get this one right here into a keyframe. I'm going to use this insert button. There we go. Now let's go back here. Let's push this one up to main, calculate it so we can see it. And I'm going to push this one into a keyframe. So I have a nice two keyframe animation. Now, what's important is let's render a preview. Oh, come on. There we go. There we go. Now, this is a perfect example of too much. This is too much. That animation, well, maybe you want that animation, but maybe you don't. Okay. Now let me stop this. Now, let's take a look at this. Now, this is not the keyframe right here. This actually generates an animation. You see how it flipped right there in the middle? Oh, let's turn on the, I'll tell you what, let's exit this. Let's get a much bigger one. Okay, there we go. Now, when you're using the MutaGen for making keyframes, you want to be careful that the keyframe, the property values that are assigned to the two formula constructs, this is formula construct number one of the first keyframe, and formula construct of the second one of the second keyframe in this particular example. You want to be careful that the properties don't change so dramatically that you actually flip through, you go beyond what you intend. You see? Now look, this is the proper keyframe, the proper view for this keyframe. All right, in frame number 51, right here. All right, and keyframe number 0. That's the proper one. But you see how it flips into it? All right, now that may be what you're going for, but it may not be. The reason this is happening is because the property values are so extremely different that it actually animates all the way through property values which do not give you a good animation. All right, now I can kind of prove that to you. We don't need the preview anymore. Let's do this. Let's get this up onto the main editor. All right, there's our Z multiplier is minus 1. Let's get that second keyframe up to the main editor. And my Z editor here is 0.51. The Z multiplier property has changed so dramatically that when I animate between these two keyframes, it does not animate well. All right, so let's end this session with this rule of thumb. When you're using the MutaGen to create keyframes, you want to keep the property values at their lowest possible amount. You don't want big changes in your properties because the animation maker will animate through a value and then to a destination value and flip or go too crazy, too wild. All right, and that may not be what you're looking for. If it is, then great, but I don't normally look for that. Let's end this session right here and pick this up again in the next session. We'll continue to talk about using the MutaGen for an animation keyframe maker, okay? All right, I'll see you in the next session.